Hi everyone, my name is Mick Davudian on behalf of Club NVegans, which is NVIDIA's vegan club. First, an official thank you to all of you for coming over here. This is going to be our first talk in what's planned to be an ongoing series. And please feel free to add your name on the sign-up sheet over on the left there so you can be aware of upcoming talks and other events we have coming up. Today's talk is going to be about 45 minutes, so I ask you to please pay attention and try not to walk out. I know everyone has busy schedules. And feel free to stick around afterwards for a Q&A. And now please take a moment to silence all electronic devices, and that includes me. And let's give a warm greeting to our guest speaker, Sailesh Rao.
Thank you, Mick. Is this on? So I'm going to talk to you about healthy living, but I have to disclose, first of all, that I'm not a medical doctor. I'm a systems specialist. So I look at things from a systems perspective, and really healthy living is a systems issue. Because you really cannot live healthily if you're marinating in filth. So it's not just about our own individual health, but it's about the health of everything around us. Okay? So environmental health becomes part of healthy living. And so I started Climate Healers in 2007, mainly because I was so shocked by what I saw in Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth. It's basically climate change that pushed me into studying this full time. And within a few months after I saw his presentation, I basically closed down our 10 gigabit Ethernet company. I think Gopal knows that. And told my wife I'm going to focus on this full time. So thankfully, she's a great partner. She said, go for it if that's what you want to do. And I didn't realize at that time what I was taking on. So it's been, 12 years? And I think I'm still not done. There's plenty more work to be done. So I'm going to tell you what I found. And just to put this in some simple terms that you can understand. I attended the Animal Liberation Conference over the past week with Mick. And you would say, what has animal liberation got to do with healthy living? Seems like it's so far off, right? So I have, Climate Healers. I have a couple of phrases I use for the word heal. How do you heal? How do you make something whole? That's what heal is. How do you make something whole? We live in a system that deals with just symptoms. We don't really make things whole currently. Our modern medicine is really based on fixing symptoms. I had a really painful experience of that in 2005, 2006, when I had a hyperthyroid condition. So I went to the doctor and I trusted these experts. I assumed that they knew what they were doing. And they started giving me this treatment. Okay? It went on for about a couple of years. And they basically said, your hyperthyroid is cured. I said, really? Okay, good. But the doctor insisted that I keep coming back and getting it tested. And after another 3 months, she said, now you have hypothyroidism. So you'll have to take thyroid medication, thyroid supplements for the rest of your life. Then I realized that was the treatment. The treatment was to kill my thyroid and then give me thyroid medication for the rest of my life. So they never really understood what was the root cause of my thyroid problem. Okay? They were just trying to figure out how to deal with the symptom. And what I discovered with Al Gore and what environmentalists are doing today is that they are trying to do exactly the same thing with the earth. Okay? Fix the symptoms of climate change and not address the root cause. So that's when I started Climate Healers in 2007, because I said, this is unacceptable. I can't do this. I cannot be party to a system where people are, it's as if you had, you go to a doctor with a mild fever, say 1 degree Celsius fever, and the doctor examines you and he says, you know that lump you have on the side of your head, the size of a coconut? That's the cause of the fever. So I'm going to give you some Tylenol to address the fever. Would you be happy with that, doctor? Or would you say, what are we going to do about this lump that you just told me about? And suppose the doctor at that point says, I'll make sure it doubles in size as quickly as possible. Okay? By the time I'm done, you look like you'll have 3 heads. That's exactly what I was hearing from Al Gore. So you have the root cause, and then he was saying, we're going to double the size of the economy in 50 years. But we'll make sure that the fever doesn't go over 2 degrees Celsius. So how do you limit it to below 2 degrees Celsius? So heal, to me, is how do you make things whole? How do you reverse it? How do you address the root cause so that you really are whole again? And heal is actually human, earth, animal liberation. All of it has to happen together. Because from a systems perspective, that's really what it's called for. How do you heal something? To make it whole again. And I am going to talk about veganism a lot. This is why the Vegan Club invited me. Because you hear about people going vegan for health. You hear about people going vegan for environment and vegan for the animals. But the most important reason why people go vegan and stay with veganism and become activists is because you become vegan for love. So that's also H-E-A-L, heal. From a systems perspective, veganism is the baseline if you want to really heal the planet, if you want to heal yourself. So people say, I will get to veganism when I can, right? At some point in the future. And I'm saying, no. That is the least we should be doing for ourselves, for the planet, and for other people around us and the animals. That's the least. Then there is more that needs to be done, because that's just the baseline. So let me give you a little bit of a history on how I came to this conclusion. I started working on the environment in 2007. I started Climate Healers in 2007. And within 2 years, I was probably the most depressed human being on the planet. I thought we were going to hell in a handbasket. There's no way that any one person can do anything about this. Okay? It's such a horrific problem. And I was in this sanctuary in the Western Ghats of India in 2009. And this is where I got the most depressed. There's nothing wrong with the sanctuary. It's a beautiful place. You can see how beautiful it is. It was started by a couple from New Jersey who went to India, bought a coffee plantation, and just let it go. Okay? They tore down the fences and let it go. So I asked them, this is so perfect, because you sit there and, it's as if every animal does its thing and it's perfect. It's part of this environment. I had the sense of perfection. So I asked them, what did you have to do to make this happen? They said, nothing. Tore down the fences, let the animals come and do their thing, and the forest came back. So a coffee plantation became this. I said, that's it? That's all you had to do? I said, no, actually there was one other thing we had to do. We had to patrol the land and make sure that no human being comes inside. And at that point, I felt extremely small, as if I didn't belong on earth. Because I was born in this forest. So she was basically telling me that I don't belong in my own birthplace. But this is a story that we tell ourselves, you know. This is a story that disconnects us from nature. So anyway, I was so depressed. And a year later, this girl was born. Okay? She's our granddaughter, Kimaya. She was born in Phoenix, Arizona, and we were living in the Bay Area at that time. And as soon as she was born, my wife disappeared. She was not to be found. She would come back after a week and then disappear again. You know? So about a month later, she told me, there is something magical about this girl. You have to go see her. And I did. And I held her in my arms for the first time, and I had the same feeling of perfection that I had at the sanctuary. So I realized that she belongs exactly as she is. We all must belong exactly as we are, but as human beings, we tell stories, and our stories don't match what we are trying to do. So I said, you know, this is my research job. I have to figure out a story in which we belong exactly as we are, and she belongs exactly as she is. And of course, as part of that story, we are going to change. Because of course we have to change. Okay? There's no question we have to change. So that started my quest. And if you look at how people deal with health and questions like this, these are the really, you know, everything we do as human beings, we address these three questions. We answer them in some way or the other, implicitly or explicitly. Who are we? What is our relationship with the world? And why are we here? So I started looking at this as the three questions that you need to answer for our species. Who are we as a species? How do we belong? What is our relationship with the world? And why are we here? Because every other species knows its place. They just come and do their thing and the forest comes back. Why is it that we can't do that? Right? So there is something in our story. How do we tell our story? How do we answer these three questions so that we do belong exactly as we are? Now, what makes us unique as a species? Who are we? Compared to any other species, we are the only species, other than maybe insects, some insects, who can congregate in the billions and do something together. Okay? That we do that through stories. Money is a story. It's just a piece of paper with a picture of dead presidents on them, right? But we all believe in that story. And because we believe in that story, we coordinate our actions. So we are a very unique species in that sense. We can actually do a lot of good, or we can do a lot of bad through coordinating our stories. So compared to any other species, like chimpanzees, you cannot get 50 chimpanzees sitting in a room and listen to another chimpanzee. It never happens. Because they'll be running around, jumping around, you know, and they won't be coordinated. If they could be coordinated, they'll probably dominate the world too. That's what we can do. So I imagine if all 7.5 billion of us come together and decide to change our story, how would we do that? Let's say we first come together physically and get together to have dinner or lunch. How big should the dining hall be? Do you think the dining hall will be bigger than the US? Bigger than California? What do you think? Bay Area?
Less than California?
Around California? Yeah. It turns out it's about 60 miles on a side if you want to meet fast food regulations. So you can imagine building a dining hall like that, and we all get together to have a meal together. Now let me ask you, how many of you are vegan here? Okay. How many of you would deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily? None. So by definition, all of you are vegan. That's who you are. In fact, 99.5% of human beings are vegan in their hearts to begin with, because that's the statistic. But a lot of us, 99.5% or 99% of the human vegans are closet vegans. They haven't come out of the closet yet. It's exactly what happened in the gay movement too. It took time for the gays to come out of the closet, to acknowledge that they are gay, to acknowledge who they really are. So this is the process we are on right now, okay, of bringing us all out of the closet. We are all vegans to begin with, unless you're sociopathic. Then you're not, right? So let's say in the dining hall we decide we're going to have a meal together. What is your meal choice? What would you choose to have a meal? What is your menu choice? So the first is the vegan choice. So if you wanted to feed everyone an organic vegan meal, you need to procure 1.5 million tons of food per meal. So that's roughly 0.5 pound per person. This is the dry weight of the food, okay? So I deal in just numbers, in fact. So dry weight of the food, you need about 0.5 pound per person. At the end of the meal, you can then take all the seeds from the meal and use that to replant 1.5 million acres of land. And you can do that for the next 8,000 meals. And bring back all the trees and the forests, and you still wouldn't have used all the land we are currently using for animal agriculture. We're using 31% of the land area of the planet just to raise animals at the moment. So on that land, if you replant all those seeds, the forest will recover and the climate will literally heal. Okay? So that's the top. At the bottom, I'm showing what we are doing today. If everyone ate what they're eating today, you need to procure 9 million tons of food, 6 times as much as what you really need to eat. And the reason is the other 7.5 million tons has to be fed to the animals who are milling outside. Okay? So they eat the other 7.5 million tons, which is roughly 2.5 pounds per person, 5 times as much food as we do. And in return, they give us less than an ounce of animal foods. The dry weight is less than an ounce. There's a 40-to-1 reduction that happens going through the animal. And of course, you'll drive 70 species extinct. You have to go kill 2 billion animals. Now, you all said you would never deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily. So who would go and kill those 2 billion animals? You have to pick on somebody to do that, right? So someone comes along and says, I have a bright idea. I'll print pieces of paper with pictures of dead presidents on them, and then we'll throw the pieces of paper on the floor. And there's a mad scramble. Whoever gets the paper, they get to eat the animals, and they get to have good food. The others don't get any food, and you force them to go and kill the animals, do all the slaughterhouse work, go graze the animals, and bring the food to you. That's what's going on now. It's the poor people who go do all that work, the dirty work. It's the women who go do all that work. So you pick on people who are weak, who are colored, who are poor, who are, female. So you get sexism, racism, colonialism, all built into the food system itself. You have to then destroy 20,000 acres of forests and degrade 7 million acres of land. So all of these environmental issues come from just how we choose our food. So what do you think is the healthy living? Which would be healthy living, the top or the bottom? It's obvious, right? Once you look at it, you say, come on, who would design a system like this? But that's what we have inherited. We've inherited a system of normalized violence, of artificial scarcity. Because roughly you get only 1 ounce of animal food per person, that's a scarce resource. So people fight for it. The average American eats 3 ounces per meal. So someone has to eat less to make up for that, right? So there's artificial scarcity created, even though you're procuring 6 times as much food as you really need. So the system of normalized violence is what we are in, and what we need to do is to transition to a system of normalized nonviolence. That is the massive transformation that is happening right now. What is our relationship with the world today? As a species, our relationship with the world is as if we are a sociopathic species. Other species look at us and say, there go those crazy guys, they're coming over now. Get away from them. Because this is really what happens. 52% of wild vertebrates were killed between 1970 and 2010. In terms of biomass, 52% of them disappeared. And that became 58% between 1970 and 2012. So we are losing an additional 3% per year. At that rate, when will we kill all 100% of wild vertebrates? By 2026. I made this calculation back in 2014 when the report came out. The first report from the World Wildlife Fund Living Planet Report 2014 said that 52% of all wild vertebrates died between 1970 and 2010. And I knew at that point that we are going to hit year 0 by 2026. Because I just took an exponential curve that has gone from 1 to 3.8, which is the increase in impact on human impact on the environment between 1970 and 2010, and said, if we extrapolate that out, how many more years can you do this before the area under the curve hits 100%? It was just 16 years. Okay? And I was so shocked, I pledged to my granddaughter that there will be more wild animals when she is 16 years old than when she was born. She was born in 2010. And it was in a public forum and everybody stood up and clapped. Because no one really wants to see this happen, but that's what's happening. And then I thought, gee, here I'm doing a crude calculation. I'm jumping to conclusions that we're going to kill all the wild animals by 2026. I thought I would wait and wait for the next data point that came out in 2016. That said that 58% of wild vertebrates died between 1970 and 2012. That's when we started the Vegan World 2026 campaign. Because we have no choice but to turn the whole world vegan by 2026. Absolutely no choice but to do that. That's the only way we're going to recover wild vertebrates by 2026. If all of us plead with our friends and family and convert everyone we know that this is a serious issue and we need to address this. And the reason it's happening is because we are raising more and more land animals just for food. So we raised 62 billion land animals in 2010, and every year we're raising an additional 2 billion animals. So by 2016, it was 74 billion land animals. So we're expanding our footprint on land. We keep deforesting 20 million to 30 million acres every year. Obviously, there's no space for the wild animals to live. They're going to die off when you do that. And this is actually, we are assaulting them from land. We're killing them in the ocean. So we kill about 1 to 3 trillion sea animals every year for food alone. And we're killing them in the air. Birds are dying really fast as well. And the reason we're killing them in the air is through our toxic chemicals. So we pour 250 billion tons of toxic chemicals into the environment every year. If you have white paper, that caused a whole bunch of toxic dioxins to be emitted, because that came from wood pulp that had to be bleached. And so whenever you pour chlorine on a hydrocarbon, you get dioxin. And dioxins are some of the strongest carcinogens known to man. So you say, 250 billion tons, just put that in, there are 7.5 billion of us. So that's about 30 tons per person per year. So imagine that's like 30 elephants that each one of us is carrying around with us of toxic chemicals. So you can understand why I was so depressed. Okay. And we are pouring 60 billion tons of greenhouse gases annually. Of that, only 36 billion tons is carbon dioxide. And the only thing that Al Gore talks about is the 36 billion tons of carbon dioxide. He doesn't talk about anything else. The rest is just peachy. I don't think so. We have to deal with all of it if we have to heal the climate. If we want to heal ourselves, we have to deal with all of this. So this is what our relationship with the world today. So then the third question is, why are we here? And it turns out to be the most important question. If you answer the why correctly, you can address the other two questions easier. So this took me another 5 years of research to figure this out.
Is humanity nothing more than a cancer on the planet, consuming its host until it is gone, guaranteeing its own destruction in the process? A quick glance at the effects of our behavior might lead us to say yes. But looks can be deceiving. Nature shows us that what is destructive on one level can also be part of a larger process of change that creates new forms of value at another level. Consider the Indian elephant. At first glance, the elephant appears to be destructive as she tramples through the forest, breaking limbs from trees, eating all the jackfruit, and littering the landscape with huge piles of poo. But when we look closer, we see that the trampling provides pathways for the other animals in the forest. The breaking of tree branches allows the sun's rays to reach the forest floor, enabling plants to grow in the understory. And elephant poop contains jackfruit seeds buried in fertile manure, which propagates the jackfruit tree. Like the elephant, could it be that some of humanity's destructive behavior might actually have some positive unintended consequences? As we look back at Earth's story, we learn that its climate has been vastly different throughout its history. When dinosaurs roamed the land, Earth was void of ice. The sea level was hundreds of meters higher and the temperature 10 degrees warmer than it is today. Modern science has learned that there is a direct relationship between the concentration of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and the Earth's temperature. Greenhouse gases are like a blanket around the Earth, absorbing just the right amount of heat from the sun to make life possible. The higher the concentration, the warmer the temperature. In Earth's more recent history, it has endured a series of long ice ages. During each ice age, life struggles to survive. Imagine a 1-mile thick sheet of ice on top of Chicago. All the forests die. Most of the life in the forests die, as very little can survive in these extreme conditions. Every 100 millennia, a slight change in the Earth's tilt allows the planet to absorb just enough additional heat to thaw some of the ice. Life expands for a few thousand years during this interglacial period before retreating again as the Earth tilts back and falls into another ice age. Enter human beings. From the Earth's perspective, humans are new to the scene. We've been here for a blink of an eye. But we've been busy. As the Earth entered its most recent interglacial period, humans began deforesting the Earth to fuel their nascent civilizations. It is calculated that more greenhouse gases were released into the atmosphere through deforestation than all the gases emitted from the burning of fossil fuels. Humans, unknowingly to them, warmed the Earth, delaying the onset of the next ice age. It turns out that there's a safe zone when it comes to greenhouse gas concentrations that keeps Earth at just the right temperature for life as we know it to thrive. Any less and we freeze, any more and we fry. In the last few decades, we've blown past this safe zone way too fast for life today to adjust, as we continue to destroy the forests for animal agriculture and find destructive new ways of extracting fossil fuels, adding ever more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. While our actions have had devastating impacts to many species on the planet, they've also enabled humans to develop the technology necessary to monitor Earth's composition. Like the part of the brain that helps stabilize and regulate our body's temperature, humans now have the ability to help Earth regulate its temperature. We've already been doing it unconsciously for thousands of years. Perhaps it's time we become conscious of our role on the planet as the thermostat species. When we choose to stop eating animals, the land used for raising those animals can be restored to forests. And those forests can sequester all of the greenhouse gases we've emitted during the fossil fuel age, bringing us back within the safe zone where life as we know it can thrive. This requires that humanity undergo a metamorphosis from an egocentric consumer culture to an ecocentric, life-enriching culture. Again, nature shows us how this is done. A caterpillar spends his entire life, from the moment he is born, eating. He eats the nutritious shell he was born out of. Then he eats the leaf the egg was clinging to. The caterpillar continues eating all the leaves he encounters. Once fully satiated, the caterpillar attaches to the underside of a twig and begins growing a cocoon. New imaginal cells are born. At first, the imaginal cells are attacked by the caterpillar's immune system. But soon, they multiply and the immune system gives up. What was once a caterpillar is now a messy glob of imaginal goo. Soon, out of the cocoon emerges a beautiful butterfly. The butterfly is a very light consumer. As she sips the nectar, she pollinates the flowers, helping to regenerate life, nurturing life instead of destroying it. The time has come for humanity to undergo its metamorphosis. Our imaginal cells are awakening. We have a unique opportunity in this pivotal time in history to realize our full potential by considering ourselves stewards of life, applying the lessons we've learned to nurture the conditions for life to thrive for all of Earth's remaining years.
So is the caterpillar satiated at the moment, do you think? If you look at the total biomass of human beings and wild animals from 10,000 to 100,000 years ago, it was roughly around 200 million tons. All the wild animals put together was 200 million tons. And we were a small blip on top of that. By 2010, human population alone was double the weight of all the wild animals from 10,000 years ago, our population. And wild animals were down by 90%. I'm sorry, 80%. It's 90% today. It was 80% then. And our farmed animals were 5 times our weight. So we are carrying something 5 times our weight unnecessarily. Literally, that's what it is. So overall, that system looks like a caterpillar that's satiated. It's much bigger than it should be, right? So you would think that people would be doing this, doing something about this right away. But that's not what's going on. Mr. Gore doesn't even talk about it. Hardly anybody talks about it. In fact, they encourage you to eat more animal foods. The governments around the world are encouraging every one of us to eat more animal foods. So it's the opposite. And you wonder why? What is going on here? Which comes to my point about human liberation. See, what is really going on? We did 3 documentaries to show what's going on. We did the human experiment, which talks about the toxins we're pouring into the environment. So we're pouring 250 billion tons of toxins into the environment every year. That works its way up the food chain. It gets more and more concentrated in animal foods. Animal foods have 10 to 100 times concentration of toxins as any plant food. So then they persuade you to eat more animal food. So you ingest that toxin in your body. And then you get chronic diseases when you do that. And they come along and fix you with pharmaceuticals. Again, it's not fixing you, it's basically addressing your symptoms. So literally human beings are being farmed. Being farmed. I mean, my granddaughter is half South Asian, 1/4 African American, and 1/4 American Indian. So I had gone to register her at the local American Indian tribe. She's an Akimelotham. So I got to be friends with the governor of that tribe, and he told me their life expectancy in the tribe is 50 because their food comes from the government. The government sends them boxes of food. They used to be farmers. They were one of the original farmers in Southwest. But their river is now dry because we sucked all the water out for ourselves. So the government said, don't worry about the food, we'll send you food. So they send boxes of what corporations would consider to be ideal food. So they get diabetes at the age of 8 or 10. And I mean, everyone is trying to live as close as possible to a dialysis clinic. So the life expectancy is 50. And the governor told me, if you don't watch out, that's exactly going to be your fate in 20 years. That's where you're all headed to. If you don't do something about it, that's where we're headed. Because that's really where the system is taking us. This is why they don't talk about it. Just like the farm animals, they're farming us. Now, who is this? Who are they? They don't want to talk about any of this. You can go watch these movies and you will see people saying, what is this? We don't know anything about animal agriculture. So we did some research to see who are these people. So we looked at all the big meat companies, the big pharma companies, big chemical companies, and big media companies, and you will see the same 4 financial holding companies at the top of that. And those holding companies don't have to disclose who their shareholders are, but they're worth $15 trillion just by themselves. And they manage another $35 trillion in mutual funds. So they have a clout equivalent to $50 trillion. And they're farming us, global meat and dairy consumers. And you can go look it up. It's actually an open secret. You can go look it up. There's no conspiracy theory here. You can go look it up on Morningstar and you'll see them. And in fact, they are the major shareholders of big banks, big oil, and big defense as well. So the ballot we cast in our votes every 4 years or every 2 years is really a joke, right? They're funding both the parties. Doesn't matter who you vote for. Eventually, whatever they want happens. So what are they doing about this? They're doing nothing about the environmental issues. They're pretending to do something. I've been to UN meetings, and I can assure you, nothing is happening there. So because their plan is to continue with this until it collapses. So keep doing it. This is what it will be by 2026. And then, of course, there'll be a mad scramble as to who's going to live, who's going to die. And they have bunkers built, I'm sure, for themselves. But I don't know what they're doing. You cannot, see, this is why we look like a sociopathic species. I think we really, literally are being led by sociopaths, you know. So Buckminster Fuller said this: you never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, you build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And that's what we've been working on. So to me, my new model is a vegan world by 2026. Get rid of all the farmed animals, instead they'll become a few sanctuary animals, and then human beings. This is a much easier problem to solve, to address all the food needs for someone like that, for a population like that. And then bring back the wild animals. And then over time, our population will decline. If you have the proper system, the population will decline automatically, not by increasing the death rate, but by decreasing the birth rate. And so we'll reach equilibrium, and we'll be the true thermostat species that the planet is looking for. And the Earth can rebound very easily. So we know that if you just bring back the original forest that used to be there on the grazing land that's currently being used for animal agriculture, you can sequester 265 gigatons of carbon on just 41% of that land, which is more than the 240 gigatons of carbon we added to the atmosphere since 1750. And this is indisputable. All we did to get this number was to replace grasslands with the original forests and just added up the numbers. So everyone knew this is true, okay? But they didn't want to look into it. No one really wanted to study this because it's a lifestyle issue. And it can happen pretty fast. We have seen examples where it can go from this to this in 4 years. But it requires us to give up that land. You can't use it for grazing animals. If you just give that up, return it back to native forests, it rebounds really fast. I used to show these two pictures during my talks, and people would ask me, are you sure they didn't take the first picture during summer and the second during winter? They're probably fooling you, right? So I went there in 2008, and I took this picture of the fence. To the right, animals are not allowed to graze. To the left, I saw a whole bunch of old cows grazing away. And I instantly went vegan on the spot. Because I realized that as dairy consumption was even worse than eating meat in terms of its impact on the planet. Because the dairy cows, if you don't kill them, they live for 25 years. They're eating up the forest. If you don't kill the male calves live for 25 years. They eat up the forest. And when they eat up the forest, there's nothing for the deer to eat. The deer dies. When the deer dies, the tiger dies. So you can see the effect of dairy consumption in India with your own eyes. So I've been working on Vegan World 2026 for a year and a half. And when I started that, I happened to be reading a story to my granddaughter. And she asked me at the end of the story, who were the first humans? Can you tell me who were the first humans? And I tried to explain to her about evolution. So I told her, imagine you're standing on the street and you're holding your mom by your hand, and you get your mom to get her mom to come stand by her, and you keep doing that. You form a line of mamas. And the other side of the street, you get a chimpanzee to do the same thing with her mama. And by the time the two lines go from Phoenix to Tucson, they would merge. Both lines would say, that's my mama too. She thought about it for a moment, and her eyes went huge. And she said, are you telling me that animals are my family? And she started bawling. Why are people eating my family? Grandpa, make them stop. Make them stop. They're eating my family. And I told her, I have started a project so that they will stop by 2026 when you're 16. She said, will you promise me that? I said, yes. She said, give me a pinky promise, because you can never break a pinky promise. And that's what I did. Yeah? And the next day she came, I think she talked to her mom, and her mom said, what did you get Grandpa to promise you? It's impossible, that's never happened. So she comes to me and she says, I hear it's very difficult, what you promised me. So you can do it by the time I'm 17, it's okay. Anyway, my goal is to give it to her, to have we need to create a vegan world. We need to set a deadline and say, this is what we're going to do. So by 2026, if we don't do this, we're going to be in big trouble. So let's work on that. Here is our campaign video.
I wish that everyone was vegan by 2026.
So that's our campaign video. And this is how we vote. The most important vote you cast is what you eat, what you consume. And you're casting that vote 3 times a day as to which world you want to see, a vegan world or you want to see a year 0, 2026. And how are others voting? 600% increase in vegans in the US in the last 3 years. 70% of the people around the world are decreasing their meat and dairy consumption. So this is a tsunami. It's going to happen. It reminds me of what happened in the internet. In 1995, people said it's going nowhere. And by 2005, it was like normal. Everybody had to use it. They couldn't live without it. And in 2005, people told me that gay marriage will never happen. And by 2015, it was normal. And in 2015, someone actually told me that veganism will never happen. So I know by 2026, it's going to be normal. The religions are also getting into the act. Now the Hindu religion had a climate declaration, and it said explicitly that adopting a plant-based diet is one of the single most powerful acts that a person can do. So they're calling on all Hindus to go vegan. And 70 Hindu leaders signed this. We are having a conference later this year in Arizona to talk about what we need to do year by year to get there. A step-by-step process for what are our intermediate goals for getting to that final goal of a vegan world by 2026. So it's about co-creating a culture of normalized non-violence from the culture of normalized violence we live in today. And it's co-hosted by ASU. Professor Lisa Barca is my co-conspirator. And these are some of the transitions we are looking at. We have a list of 40 different things that we need to change. We need to go from this to that, from animal slavery to animal liberation, from domination control relating to partnership respect relating. And you can look that up on our website. And I really believe that this is the right time for this transformation to happen. Because every major cultural transformation in human history has happened when we did 3 things. We changed what we ate, we changed how we harnessed energy, and we changed how we communicated. So if we look at it, for discovery of fire, communications, it was speech, and then for energy it was cooking, for fire, and for food it was cooking. For the agricultural revolution, it was writing for communications, it was animal energy for energy, it was crops for food. Industrial revolution, it was the printing press, fossil fuels, and factory farms. And today, it's going to be the internet, distributed internet, in which you have individual privacy and institutional transparency, not the other way around. So that will be internet with the holochain is what I see that as a way to do that. Solar energy with DC grid technology, so it's distributed energy. And it's veganism, so it's basically distributed food as well. So that will distribute the power back to each one of us. So we're also planning a research and development center in Costa Rica where we try out all of these transitions in one place so we can work out all the kinks. So I call it the Imaginal Cell Academy in Costa Rica. We have found a site. We're collecting money for that at the moment. And what can you do? All of my slides are available on my website, and I have slide notes for every one of them. So please go ahead and download them and go talk to your friends, talk to your family. Okay? So you'll be empowered. And all of the data is available on my website too. You can look it up. We have references that you can look to see where it came from. And Mahatma Gandhi did something very similar exactly 100 years ago in India. He did the Khadi movement, in which he convinced people to change their clothes, and that literally got the British Empire on its knees, begging to negotiate with him. Okay? He did that in exactly 12 years. And this is one of his famous quotes. He said, "It's my duty to induce people by any honest means necessary to wear Khadi." So he was a very militant activist for Khadi. And he convinced everyone to become a militant activist for Khadi. And this is really what we need to do for veganism as well. It's exactly the same grassroots movement that has to happen now, because you're not going to get support from institutions on this. And so it is our duty to induce people by any honest means necessary to go vegan. And all the facts, references for the facts are in climatehealers.org/facts. And I've written 3 books. I've written 2 books, and that one is a joint with the Brother Wolf Animal Rescue, Meet the Mitocracy. So I've written these 2 books, and they're all available online for free. So please go through them. You can look up all the references in my books. I've tried to make it a fairly comprehensive research book. Okay, so thank you very much. We have time for questions too, right? Yeah. Yeah.
I think the current administration is pushing everything backwards with eliminating all the regulations that was put in place by the other administration.
Right. So the question is, the current administration is pushing everything back by eliminating all the regulations that were put in place by the other administration. I just repeated. So I have a different perspective on that. I mean, I don't think the current administration is bad or good. I don't see the previous administration as bad or good, okay? But I just see the facts as to what is happening. What is happening with the elimination of all these regulations? In fact, they even authorized the killing of hibernating bears and wolf cubs. I mean, it's horrific what is happening now, right? Truly horrific. Removing all regulations so you can pollute anywhere, anything you want. But it's basically showing that the current system is so messed up. Don't even expect any solution from this. We have to build our own. So in that sense, the current administration is exposing the corruption in the system that was always there. Even though there were regulations, no one ever enforced them. It was hardly ever enforced. There are regulations about animal cruelty, and we went there yesterday to a factory farm and said, according to the regulations, we have a right to go in and inspect because we have evidence that there was cruelty going on here. Guess what? The sheriff wouldn't let us. So 40 people got arrested yesterday. So it doesn't matter what regulations, what laws you have. If no one enforces them, it's useless. So this administration has basically said it's useless. So we're going to dump it. So you see that nothing is happening in the current system. So it allows you to become empowered. So I see some positives, that's all I'm saying. Yes, sir.
Two questions. What do you think of Joe Salatin's model of animal husbandry, which he claims is sustainable? I don't know if you're familiar with Joe Salatin.
Yes.
And also, in a fully plant-based model without animal husbandry, how will you feed the crops?
Right. Right. So Joe Salatin's model, actually he does get a lot of input from the outside because he's getting soy feed for his animals as well. So what happens is when you take biomass from a field in the form of cows or eggs or whatever, and you ship it somewhere else, you're removing nutrients as well. It's not just the carbon that's going, it's nutrients are going as well. So he has to find some way to replenish that. And that's why he's bringing in soy and other food from the outside. Anything you do with animals is going to require this huge jump that I told you, a 40x increase in resource requirements. And it creates a system of scarcity, artificial scarcity, and all of the other oppressions that is built in. And it doesn't change with Joel Salatin's model. And the second question was?
How will you get the nutrients from the soil?
Oh, yes. So there is a whole movement about veganic agriculture right now that doesn't use any animal input except wild animals. Wild animals are allowed to come and live, and they drop their poop if they eat something. But otherwise, you can take the biomass, the crop residues, and you can actually compost them yourself instead of feeding it to an animal and taking it out at the other end, right? So it's another way of doing composting. So there are cyclic systems that people have been building now for quite a few years that don't require any animal input. Yes?
Since there is a major change required from the food system, from animal foods to plant foods, what should we do as a part of 2026 campaign to make sure there is enough availability of plant-based foods around the world?
Right. So what should we do as part of the 2026 campaign to make sure that there is plenty of plant-based foods available? It turns out that even in the current system, plant-based foods are 80% of the foods that we eat. Okay? It's only 20% that's animal-based foods. And actually less than 20%. So it's really that less than 20% that they're substituting with other plant-based foods. But I think part of the transformation that has to happen is also shifting from fertilizer-based agriculture, industrial agriculture, to veganic agriculture, organic and veganic agriculture. That needs to happen too. And the availability of plant-based substitutes for transition has to happen. Because people are used to certain ways of eating, and it's hard for them to change unless there is a transition method. This is why I think plant-based milks and foods like that are very important. Even though we are the only species that drinks milk after it's been weaned, no other species does that. So milk is really not a necessary food, so to speak. It's just that we're used to it, and so we want something like that when we transition. But eventually we'll stop it too.
So about organic agriculture, we understand that it's healthier because it doesn't have those chemicals. But there's an argument from the other side that the yield is low. If you
Right.
Can you talk about that?
So the question is, organic agriculture doesn't yield as much as conventional agriculture with fertilizers. It turns out that on a sustainable basis, organic agriculture actually yields more on a sustainable basis. But you can mine the soil very quickly with conventional agriculture and take it all out very quickly and then turn that into desert and move on to the next one. That's what's been going on. So temporarily it looks like you're getting a lot more yield, right? But you're literally mining the soil and you're killing it, moving on to another one. We can't afford to do that anymore. We've done that enough. We have turned around 1/3 of the land area of the planet into desert. We did that. The Sahara wasn't there as a desert to begin with. We created it. The telltale sign is that the Sahara is exactly where the ancient civilizations of the world were. It goes all the way from the western edge of Africa all the way into India as the Thar Desert. It goes all the way into China as the Gobi Desert. The entire thing is a desert, and that's where the ancient civilizations of the world were. So, yeah, we have to get to a sustainable way of doing things, in which case organic is the only way to go, or veganic is the only way to go. Did you have a question before?
Yes, a couple of questions. One is not to do with food, there's other factors. You're talking about climate heating, so I was wondering if there's other things that you're looking at in addition to the food
Right.
portion, so air pollution or the number of vehicles on the streets.
Right.
All of that is affecting you.
Right.
And the second question is unrelated to that question is, so there's in veganism, there's a lot of talk of, the when you're slaughtering animals right next to each other, it affects the psyche of the animals, and that in turn affects your food and
Right.
your consumption when you consume it. Is there there's this whole thing about plants actually communicating with each other in the forest?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't there anything like that that happens in the plant kingdom when you're growing crops and you're
Right.
chopping them off right next to each other? Isn't there anything similar in the
Mhm.
plant world that we're talking about moving from one kind
Right.
to a different kind of
Right.
cultivation?
Okay, so two questions. The first question was anything other than food for veganism. Veganism literally, if you just look at it from the perspective of the definition I gave you, which is you wouldn't deliberately hurt an innocent animal unnecessarily, it turns out that it automatically leads to conscious simplicity. Because every act of consumption hurts some animal somewhere unnecessarily. If it's unnecessary, then it's unnecessary. So as a vegan, you start off with food, and then it becomes your clothes, and then it becomes minimalism. Over time, I only buy things once a year now. So you get to that point where you get to conscious simplicity. So this is why it is so contrary to the current system. This is why they hate it, because it's going to collapse the entire consumer economy. Okay, so you really need a new system for veganism, a new system in which you don't depend on consumption and growth. But it depends, so instead of managing the economy for growth, you have to manage the economy for ecological thrivability. So it's a different mindset altogether. So we have a list of 40 different changes that need to happen. So you can look it up on our website. I gave a list of some 10 of them, and that includes, things like, human affairs, how do you deal with equality among humans, and so all of them have to be solved, right? And secondly, about plants also suffering, so to speak, or plants also changing when they're being eaten and being hurt. Plants tend to thrive in an environment where there are animals that eat a little bit. Don't eat the whole thing, but eat a little bit at a time, because then they grow more, right? So that's the kind of interaction we need to have with plants. It shouldn't be the current industrial model where we just take the entire damn thing out and then dump it all into the one and then plant another one, right? So it's much more, it's not a mechanical, it's not something that is amenable to industrial agriculture, but it's more of what we can do ourselves if we get into it ourselves. So, and I think that's what we will wind up doing eventually in the new system, because the new system has to be a system in which money is not trickled from the top down. I mean, if you look at the way we do things today, that's really 18th century technology, The money is being trickled from the top down, and you got pieces of paper with pictures of dead presidents. I mean, this is like old stuff. We're way beyond that. Why are we sticking to that old stuff, right? So you can do cryptographic currency that's tied to the ecological footprint, and so that guarantees that when we close the loop, we don't use more than half the earth, so you have this built-in constraint in the system itself. So ideally, what I'm talking about is a system in which people live their ordinary lives and the planet thrives. That's the system we want. We don't want a system where people live their ordinary lives and the planet dies. That's the system we have today. Yes?
How many people do you think this planet?
That carrying capacity question? You saw how many we are sustaining today in terms of food. We are collecting 9 million tons of food per meal. Okay? So we are collecting the equivalent of 45 billion people. Equivalent. But in the form of so many animals. I'm not suggesting we go to 45 billion people. It's like wildly out of question. But I think the planet can sustain 10 for a temporary basis. But in the long run, as I showed you, we have to become smaller and smaller so that we are just the thermostat species. We are not the species that all other species are. No, all other species get a little bit and we get the whole big pie. So it's probably around 2 to 3 billion on a long-term basis. Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.